He was known as the Sentinel Peak Phantom, a man who sat atop a mountain veined with silver, yet hadn't offered a kind word to a soul in 15 desolate years. When Jedediah Stone finally rode into Timber Falls, every woman from the silk-bonnet widows to the tightly corseted beauties lined Pioneer Avenue, hoping to capture the richest bachelor in Montana territory. But Jedediah didn't glance at the rustling skirts or the simpering smiles. His gaze swept past them all, settling deep in the shadows of Mr. Silas Pinter's mercantile exchange, on the woman everyone mocked. The one they called Elephant Alara, the woman who had once, without a word, mended his busted hiking boot when no one else would even stoop to look. The winter of 1878 clawed at the Montana Territory, but the biting cold was a trifle compared to the profound silence that clung to Jedediah Stone wherever he moved. He was a pillar of a man, broad as an oak trunk, with a grisly thick beard and eyes the color of storm-struck obsidian. For 8 years, the folks of Timber Falls had only seen him from afar, a dark specter against the snow, riding the high ridges of the Obsidian Mountains. Rumors, like tumbleweeds, carried farther than truth in that town. Some whispered he'd found a silver lode thick as a man's thigh. Others swore he'd killed a man and fled the law. No one knew for certain. They only knew he was rich, powerful, and utterly alone. On a bitter Tuesday morning, the heavy door of the mercantile exchange swung open with a resounding bang. Wind howled in, lashing snow and the heavy scent of pine needles. Jedediah Stone stepped inside. The store hushed. He stomped the snow from his heavy boots and moved toward the counter. His left hiking boot was ripped open at the sole, the leather flapping with every step, soaking his sock in icy slush. The damage was unmistakable. Near the pot-bellied stove, the town's most eager women clustered. Seraphina Croft, proprietor of the hat shop, adjusted her velvet cap. Lillian Du Bois, the mayor's daughter, pinched her cheeks, striving for a rosy glow. "Mr. Stone," Seraphina purred, stepping into his path. "You must be dreadfully lonesome up on that mountain." Jedediah offered no smile, no nod. He barely looked at her. "Move," he rumbled, his voice rough, low, and final. Seraphina forced a brittle laugh. "If you need a warm meal or some company, my door is always open." "I need nails," Jedediah said to Mr. Pinter, cutting her off. "And rye whiskey." As he stepped around Seraphina, his torn boot caught on a loose floorboard. He stumbled slightly. Lillian giggled. "He walks like a broken-down nag," she whispered, loud enough for all to hear. Jedediah stiffened, his hands clenching into fists. He could grapple with bears, endure blizzards, shatter rock with his bare hands. But petty mockery in a warm room still scorched him. He was about to turn and leave without his nails when a soft, yet unwavering voice echoed from the back of the store. "Seat." The voice was calm. Not rude, not timid, just certain. From behind a stacked barricade of blankets, Alara Vance emerged. She was 37, the heaviest woman in Timber Falls. Her plain gray dress hung loose, marked with oil and flour. Her dark hair was pulled back into a simple, tight bun. She kept her eyes lowered. "My boot's busted," Jedediah said. "I can see that," Alara replied. She pointed to a wooden crate near the stove. "Seat. You'll lose a toe walking back up the mountain like that." The women waited for him to laugh at her, for him to insult her size. Instead, he sat. Alara knelt slowly, lowering herself with visible effort. She lifted his heavy foot into her lap. Her hands were warm and strong. From her apron, she drew a thick needle and wax thread. "Don't look at me," she murmured quietly. "Just drink your whiskey." The store remained silent for 20 long minutes. Only the crackle of the stove and the steady push of her needle through tough leather filled the air. She did not rush. She reinforced the heel, doubled the stitching, and sealed the edges tight. It was meticulous work, skilled work. When she finished, she set his foot down gently. "That'll hold," she said, rising slowly. Jedediah stood and stamped his foot. The boot felt stronger than before. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a raw diamond, the size of a robin's egg. A collective gasp rippled through the room. He held out to her. Alara stepped back. "No," she said softly. "Take it," he replied. "I didn't fix it for payment. I fixed it because it's cold outside." She turned and vanished into the back room before he could argue. Jedediah stood still, staring at the empty doorway. Then he looked at the two beautiful women, watching the diamond with hungry eyes. Slowly, he put the stone back into his pocket, grabbed his rye whiskey, and walked out without another word. By morning, the entire town buzzed. Jedediah's stone had silver, real silver, and Elephant Alara had touched him. At the Clipper's Edge barber shop, Marshall Tate laughed loudly. "The Sentinel Peak Phantom and Big Alara. That's a sight I'd pay to see." The men joined in his laughter, but in the small shack at the edge of town, there was no mirth. Gideon Vance, Alara's father, slammed an empty bottle onto the table. "You turned down a diamond," he screamed. "Serafina says it was worth $500. Alara stirred a pot of thin bean soup, her eyes fixed on the floor. "It wasn't right," she said. Gideon seized her arm, his grip hard. "I owe $300 at the Golden Spur Saloon. They'll break my legs." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry doesn't pay debts," he shouted. Then his eyes changed. A greedy thought began to form. "Maybe it's not too late," he muttered. "They say he looked at you. Actually looked at you." Alara felt a chill. He was just grateful. "He's rich," Gideon insisted, "and lonely. Men get desperate in winter." The next morning, he shoved a basket of biscuits into her hands. "You're going up the mountain. You'll apologize and charm him." "I won't," Alara said quietly. Gideon stepped closer, his breath sour. "You'll do as I say, or you can sleep outside." 3 days later, Jedediah was chopping wood outside his Lone Ridge cabin when he heard a pack horse laboring up the snowy path. He lifted his Winchester rifle and aimed. Then he saw her, Alara, wrapped in blankets, struggling through deep snow. He lowered the rifle. "You lost," he called. She dragged Dusty, the pack horse, to a halt and walked toward him, breathing hard. "My father insisted I bring these," she said, offering the basket, "as an apology for refusing your diamond." Jedediah noticed the bruise on her arm where the shawl had slipped. "Your father hit you. That's not your concern," she said firmly. "Here are the biscuits. I'll be going." "Blizzard's coming," Jedediah replied. 4-hour ride back. You won't make it." She looked at the dark, churning sky. Fear flickered in her eyes. "Get inside," he said, "unless you want to freeze." She hesitated only a second before following him. The cabin surprised her. It was warm, clean. Shelves of books lined the walls. Shakespeare, history, maps. "You read?" she asked. "I have time," he answered. The storm raged outside while they sat near the fire. They didn't talk about town gossip. They spoke of leatherworking, of her mother, who had been a fine saddler in Boston. "If the inside isn't strong," Alara said softly, "the whole thing falls apart." Jedediah watched her in the firelight. He saw more than her size. He saw steady hands, intelligent eyes, quiet strength. "I have a proposition," he said at last. Alara stiffened. "I need a partner, a wife in name, someone I can trust. You marry me. You get half the silver, protection from your father, and a home where no one mocks you." She stared at him. "You want to marry me?" "Let them laugh," he said. "I prefer a sturdy boot over a painted slipper." Alara thought of the store, the laughter, the bruise on her arm. She reached for his hand. "I say yes." The blizzard ended 2 days later, and by noon, Timber Falls would fall to its knees. The sky was clear and sharp. The morning Jedediah Stone rode back into Timber Falls with Alara sitting in front of him on Thunder, his bay stallion. Snow still capped the rooftops, but the sun made everything shine like glass. People stepped out of shops when they heard the thunder of hooves. Jedediah did not slow down. Alara sat wrapped in his heavy, grizzly fur coat, her hands gripping the saddle horn. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the whole town could hear it. She felt every stare, every whisper, every cruel memory pressing against her back. The blacksmith lowered his hammer. The baker emerged with flour on his hands. Serafina Croft and Lillian Du Bois stood frozen on the wooden boardwalk. Jedediah stopped in front of Judge Elijah Thorne's Justice Hall Annex. He dismounted first, then turned and lifted Alara down as if she weighed nothing. His hands were steady and careful. "Head up," he said quietly near her ear. "You're with me." They stepped inside the dusty office. The judge looked up, startled. "Mr. Stone," he stammered. "What brings you down from the mountain?" "I'm here to get married," Jedediah said. The judge blinked. His eyes moved slowly to Alara. "To Alara Vance?" he asked. "Is there a law against it?" Jedediah replied calmly. The ceremony was short. No music, no flowers, just the scratch of a pen and the ticking of a clock. When it was time for the ring, Jedediah did not pull out a small store-bought ring. He removed a braided rawhide thong from around his neck. Hanging from it was a heavy silver ring set with a deep blue sapphire. "My grandmother's," he said. He slid it onto Alara's finger. It fit perfectly. Her breath caught. No one had ever given her something so beautiful. "By the power vested in me," the judge said nervously, "I pronounce you husband and wife." The door burst open. Gideon Vance stumbled inside, his face twisted with anger and greed. "You can't do this," he shouted. "She's my daughter. She belongs to me." Alara stepped back, old fear rising in her chest. Jedediah moved forward. "She belonged to you," he said calmly. "Now she is my wife." Jedediah reached into his grisly coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. He tossed it at Gideon. It landed against his chest with a heavy clink. $200 in silver dust, Jedediah said. "That covers every debt you owe in town. If you come near her again, I'll bury you where no one finds you." Gideon grabbed the pouch. His anger faded instantly. He did not look at Alara. He did not say goodbye. He rushed out of the office toward the Golden Spur Saloon. Alara stood shaking. Jedediah took out a clean handkerchief and wiped her cheek gently. "Tears are done," he said. "We have business." They stepped outside. The crowd had doubled. Jedediah took Alara's hand and raised it so everyone could see the sapphire blazing in the sunlight. "My wife," he announced. Silence fell across Pioneer Avenue. Seraphina's face turned pale. Lillian's lips trembled. Jedediah did not take Alara back to the mountain that day. Instead, he walked her to the Grand Summit Inn, the finest brick building in town. "Best suite," he told the clerk, "and send for Madame Du Bois, the tailor." For the next week, Timber Falls watched in disbelief. Madame Du Bois measured Alara carefully. "You have strong shoulders," she said, "and a waist hidden under these sacks." Silk dresses arrived, deep emerald, rich sapphire, dark ruby, colors that made Alara's hazel eyes shine. For the first time in her life, she ate full meals, roast elk, fresh red vegetables. Her body stopped clinging to fear. Her laughter came easily. Jedediah watched her closely. "They're afraid of you," he said one evening over dinner. "Afraid?" Alara asked softly. "They laughed when they thought you were weak," he replied. "Now they see you beside me. That changes things." Across town, in Mayor Quentin Du Bois's house, anger burned. The mayor paced his parlor. Seraphina Croft sat stiffly in a velvet chair. Lillian stood by the window, furious. "He's humiliating us," Seraphina hissed, parading her around like royalty. "It's the silver that matters," the mayor muttered. "If he invests elsewhere, this town loses everything." Lillian's voice was sharp. "If they have a child, that fortune stays with them forever." The room fell silent. Seraphina leaned forward slowly. "Then we separate them." The mayor looked uneasy. "Ow!" Seraphina's eyes were cold. "We plant doubt." In the corner of the room stood a man named Vance Kestrel. A drifter, handsome, dangerous. He worked for money and did not ask questions. $500, Seraphina said smoothly. "Convince Jedediah that his bride is not so innocent." Vance Kestrel smiled. The trap was set for Tuesday. Jedediah rode to his Sentinel Peak claim early that morning. Before leaving, he told Alara to stay inside or take a guard. But Alara wanted to surprise him. She wanted to buy him a new saddle for Thunder. She slipped out the back door of the inn alone. As she passed the alley behind the Golden Spur Saloon, a hand grabbed her wrist. "Well," a smooth voice said, "if it isn't the Queen of Timber Falls." She turned. Vance Kestrel stood close, blocking her path. "Let me pass," she said firmly. He stepped closer. trapping her against the brick wall. Jedediah leaves you alone, and you come wandering. Maybe you're looking for something more exciting. I'm looking for a saddle, she said coldly. Suddenly, he grabbed her waist and pulled her against him. He tore at the lace on her collar and messed her hair with rough hands. Get off me, she shouted, pushing him hard. She was stronger than he expected. He stumbled backward. At that exact moment, the saloon door opened. Mayor Du Bois and two councilmen stepped out. And down Pioneer Avenue, riding fast, came Jedediah Stone. He had returned early due to a broken wagon wheel. He saw the torn dress. He saw the stranger near his wife. Vance Kestrel wiped at his own cheek, pretending to clean lipstick. Next time, Vance Kestrel sneered loudly, "Don't be so rough." Jedediah dismounted slowly. The air felt heavy. Alara ran toward him. He attacked me. Mayor Du Bois stepped forward. We saw them embracing, he said. Another man nodded. She waved him over. Alara's chest tightened. They're lying. Jedediah looked at her. He remembered the woman who fixed his boot in silence. The woman who walked through a blizzard. The woman who said she had dignity. He stepped past her and walked straight to Vance Kestrel. You say she wanted you? Jedediah asked quietly. She couldn't keep her hands off me, Vance Kestrel replied. Jedediah moved faster than lightning. He grabbed Vance Kestrel by the throat and lifted him off the ground. My wife doesn't lie, Jedediah said. Vance Kestrel's face turned red. He clawed at Jedediah's arm. Tell the truth. It was a bet. Vance Kestrel choked. They paid me. The mayor, Serafina. They said if you thought she was loose, you'd throw her out. Gasps filled the alley. Jedediah dropped him into the mud. He turned to the mayor. I own your debt, Jedediah said calmly. The bank sold it to me this morning. Your house, your land, everything. The mayor's mouth fell open. You have 24 hours to leave town, Jedediah continued. Or I remove you myself. Jedediah returned to Alara. He wrapped his grisly coat around her torn dress. Let's go, he said softly. The crowd parted as they walked away. Back in the inn room, Alara's hands trembled. I'm sorry, she whispered. You revealed the snakes, Jedediah replied. Now I know where they hide. He cleaned her face gently. When she leaned into him, he held her close. But outside, anger was growing. By nightfall, a mob gathered. Marshal Tate stood at the front with a gun. Jedediah Stone, he shouted. You're under arrest. A brick smashed through the inn window. Then a lantern flew onto the porch. Flames rose instantly. Smoke filled the lobby. Jedediah pulled Alara toward the kitchen. The back door was blocked with a wagon. It's a trap, Alara coughed. Jedediah looked around. Heat climbed the walls. Window, he said, pointing upward. No, Alara answered quickly. The roots cellar. She tore back a rug. Beneath, it was a metal ring set into the floor. Jedediah pulled with all his strength. The door ripped open. They climbed down into darkness just as the ceiling collapsed in fire above them. They crawled through a narrow tunnel beneath the town. Mud soaked her silk dress. Smoke burned their lungs. They emerged near the frozen Willow Creek behind the inn. The building was a tower of flames. They think we're dead, Jedediah said quietly. Before they could move, a shadow stepped from under the bridge. Gideon Vance stood there with a shotgun aimed at them. They promised me $1,000, he cried, if I made sure you didn't come out. Alara walked forward through the icy water until the gun was inches from her chest. Pull it, she said softly. Her father sobbed. He dropped the gun into the creek. Jedediah picked it up and unloaded it. Leave Montana territory, Jedediah told him. If I see you again, I won't be kind. Gideon ran into the dark. Jedediah looked at Alara. Do you trust me? He asked. With my life, she answered. Good, he said. Tonight, Timber Falls learns what happens when you try to burn a mountain. Dawn came quietly over Timber Falls, soft and golden, as if nothing terrible had happened in the night. Smoke still rose from the black ruins of the Grand Summit Inn. Charred beams leaned against each other like broken bones. The town gathered in the square, whispering, staring at the ashes. Mayor Quentin Du Bois stood on the inn steps, his coat buttoned tight, a grave look on his face. Serafina Croft stood beside him, dressed in black, holding a lace handkerchief to her dry eyes. It is a tragedy, the mayor announced loudly. A terrible accident. The lantern must have tipped. Mr. Stone and his poor wife were trapped inside. We did all we could. Serafina nodded sadly. Some men bring ruin with them, she said softly to the women near her, and poor Alara followed him. The crowd murmured. Some looked sad, others looked uneasy. The mayor cleared his throat. As acting official, I will take temporary control of Mr. Stone's holdings to settle town debts. Is that so? The voice cut through the square like a rifle shot. Every head turned. Walking down Pioneer Avenue were two figures covered in soot and mud. Their clothes were torn. Their faces were blackened with smoke, but they walked upright. Jedediah Stone and Alara. Gasps filled the air. Ghosts, someone whispered. The mayor staggered back, and Serafina dropped her handkerchief. You're dead, the mayor breathed. Disappointed? Jedediah asked calmly. He stepped forward, his boots crunching over frozen mud. Alara walked beside him, her ruined silk dress dragging behind her like a battle flag. The fire you set didn't finish us, Alara said, her voice clear and steady. She pointed at Serafina. I saw you throw the lantern. Liar, Serafina snapped. She's hysterical. Before Marshall Tate could move, the sound of thunder rolled across the street. 6 riders galloped into town. Their coats were long and dusty. Silver badges shone on their chests. United States Marshals. The lead rider dismounted and stepped forward. Nobody move, he said firmly. The crowd froze. Jedediah nodded once to the marshal. Right on time. You sent the telegram 3 days ago, the marshal said. Said you had proof of embezzlement and conspiracy. The mayor's face drained of color. 3 days ago, but the fire was last night. I didn't come to town for dresses, Jedediah replied. I came to check your books. He turned toward the crowd. This man, he said, pointing at the mayor, stole tax money to cover his gambling debts. When I refused to invest in his failing schemes, he tried to burn my wife and me alive. Murmurs grew louder. Anger replaced confusion. And her, Jedediah added, looking at Serafina. She paid a man to ruin my wife's name. Then she paid another to kill her. Serafina shook her head wildly. He's lying. Am I? Jedediah asked quietly. At that moment, Vance Kestrel was dragged forward by 2 marshals, his throat still bruised from the night before. They paid me, Vance Kestrel croaked. The mayor and Serafina. $500. The square erupted. Marshal Tate tried to slip away, but a marshal grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. Metal cuffs snapped shut around the mayor's wrists. Around Serafina's wrists. You can't arrest me, the mayor shouted. I am the law. Not anymore, the marshal said. Alara watched silently as the most powerful people in town were led away like common thieves. For the first time in her life, no one laughed at her. No one whispered. They only stared. The baker stepped forward slowly. Mrs. Stone, he said, lowering his head. We're sorry. Others followed. The blacksmith, the shopkeeper, even Madame Du Bois. Apologies came like falling snow, quiet, relentless. Jedediah did not smile, but he did not gloat. He simply took Alara's hand. We're rebuilding the inn, he announced, and no one in this town will be judged by their looks again. Not while I own it. Then he turned to Mr. Pinter. The mercantile exchange deed is yours. On one condition, every customer gets respect. Pinter nodded quickly. By afternoon, the marshals rode out with the prisoners. The town felt smaller without its false leaders. Jedediah and Alara returned to the inn ruins one last time. Smoke still drifted into the cold air. You lost your finest building, Alara said softly. I can build another, Jedediah replied. I can't build another you. She looked at him, tears shining in her eyes. They packed dusty that evening. No parade, no music, just quiet departure. Ready? Jedediah asked as he helped her on a thunder. To the cabin? She asked. To our home, he corrected. They rode toward the mountains as the sun dipped low, turning snow peaks into rivers of gold. Winter passed. Spring melted the ice along Willow Creek. Wildflowers bloomed across the high meadows. The Lone Ridge cabin, which once held only silence, now held laughter. Alara filled the shelves with neatly folded cloth. She stitched curtains for the windows. She cooked real meals. She read books beside the fire. Jedediah no longer sat alone, staring at flames. He listened to her voice. He listened to her hum while she worked. And when she walked across the cabin floor, she walked with confidence. Months later, when they rode into Timber Fall for supplies, the town did not see Elephant Alara. They saw Mrs. Alara Stone. Children waved at her. Women asked for her advice on sewing and business. Even men tipped their hats. No one dared mock her again. They called her the Mountain Queen. But Jedediah never called her that. To him, she was simply Alara, the woman who fixed his boot without asking for a diamond, the woman who stood in front of a gun without fear, the woman who mended more than leather. One quiet evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the obsidian mountains in soft pink light, Alara rested her head against his shoulder. "You ignored all the pretty widows," she said with a small smile. "I chose the only one who was real," Jedediah answered. The wind moved gently through the pines. The Sentinel Peak phantom was gone. In his place stood a husband, and beside him sat the woman who proved that true worth is not stitched in a silk or painted on a face, but sewn deep inside the soul. In the whole Montana territory, no one ever called her Big Alara again. She was loved,